A new challenge then for Jaap Stam, his first venture into the United States. The full media conference is on fccincinnati.com and the club Facebook page. Stephane, you've been covering MLS for a long time. Quite a challenge for him. And now 13 of the 26 clubs have overseas bosses.
Well, it's going to be a very challenging time for Jaap Stam. He's coming with it was one of his assistants he had with him at the Dzhulai and Feyenoord. Clearly, it's going to be difficult for Jaap Stam after two difficult spells at Feyenoord and Dzhulai. I know he did quite well at Reading, but so far he has been struggling to put a stamp on the team. And the general manager for Cincinnati is a Dutch guy, Jauny. It definitely facilitated the signing of Jaap Stam. He was definitely, on the list for a while, and so no surprises at the club, but it's going to be very, very challenging. Even though it's got the backup of Jauny Camp, he's coming with Saïd Bakati, who had the same experience at Dzhulai and Feyenoord, bad experiences. And there's two coaches, Johan Dame, a French guy, who was the interim manager last season, will stay on the staff, and Ivar van Dinteren. I think it could be a chance for Jaap Stam to revive his career as a manager, but it's going to be very challenging. Cincinnati has been struggling, even though they strengthened the squad over the summer in March and in January and February, but it's going to be difficult.
Yeah, we've heard Stam's comments about how he thinks the MLS compares with other leagues. Now, you commentated a lot for ESPN Africa. How do you see the MLS compared to the other big leagues that we're used to in Europe?
Well, look, I've been covering the MLS for the last, 8 or 9 years. I can see a massive improvement, and especially if you look at the type of player they're bringing for the last, 2 or 3 years. And initially it was like retired players from Europe, like Steven Gerrard, David Beckham. But now you can see younger players coming from European clubs, but also from South America. I had a meeting a few years ago, I think a couple of years ago, with the MLS guys in London, in IMG. They had a clear idea of they want the MLS to evolve. They want to become a platform for young players to trade those players to bigger leagues, and they want to improve the style of football. There's a strong will to improve the league, and I've seen it, for the last few years, definitely. And there's more and more South American players coming through. They're going to the right direction financially. They have the power to do it, and they're well structured. They have proper stadiums. And I can definitely see football has taken off in the States and North America as well, because Canada is part of the MLS as well.
Yeah, I mean, we heard from Jeff Birding, who's the president of FC Cincinnati. They're building a new stadium, which has a capacity of 26,000, which I guess fits in quite well. That's pretty decent. I mean, Toronto have been playing in the BMO field, which is about the same size on the edge of the city.
There's a huge fan base, in Cincinnati, but not only in Cincinnati. If you like LAFC, I mean, it's a great stadium and great atmosphere. Los Angeles Galaxy is pretty good, if you're a fan to go to a game. Vancouver, but also more an impact, huge fan base, historical clubs, in the MLS, and people obviously not knowing the league. And if you don't watch it, it's difficult to have an idea. But they're all big clubs in the States and in Canada, and it's coming the right direction. I think, for me to go forward, they have to be part of the, ideally, the Copa Libertadores, because they're doing Champions League in the CONCACAF. The only challenging time is when they play the Mexican clubs. However, the MLS, again, they have an idea to create a new competitions to involve all the clubs in North America, Central America, and the South America. That would be a great competition, but are you going to fit it with all those federations? It's going to be very challenging, but I think it could be a magnificent competition, like having Cincinnati or LAFC playing against Boca Junior. It could be very interesting.
There are a lot of South American managers also go into the MLS, and we had Gerardo Martino, who previously managed Barcelona, go into Atlanta United and winning the title, and they played some good football. I haven't seen much, but Stephane probably will have a few more words to say about it. And then we had Guillermo Barros Esqueloto go into MLS after winning things with Boca Juniors. And it's interesting that in Argentina, they didn't really expect that sort of competition, let's say, because they are used to losing their young players to European clubs, which became normal for them. And now they're losing their young players to MLS. And at first it was something pretty weird for them, but then they realized, okay, they can get good money for those players from clubs in the US. So the competition that Stephane mentioned, potential competition, is also interesting, but the logistics are not there, because even now in Copa Libertadores, when you have to travel let's say, I don't know, from Uruguay to Bolivia, it can take a lot of time. You cannot just travel by a chartered flight sometimes, you have to take stopovers in different countries. And imagine traveling from Montevideo, let's say, to play in New York, and then getting back and playing the local league games and all that stuff. The idea in itself, it's quite good because you could get Mexican clubs who are really strong because they're not playing Libertadores. They used to play Libertadores in Tigres, and Chivas, I think, played in the final of Libertadores, which was a good thing for the competition when they have Mexican clubs. But now they're not playing there. And from the commercial point of view, yeah, it's an interesting idea, but it's really difficult to make it happen. So at the moment, yeah, Argentina has to suffer losing its talents to MLS alongside the European clubs and leagues.
What we've seen for the last as well, maybe 3 or 4 years, they're starting to have academies and to develop, the youth project. And especially, Dallas has been, really pushing for that and having proper structure in place. And Dallas, head coach now, was in charge of the academy at the club, and he took over the first team anyway last year, Luchi Gonzalez. And his assistant coach is Peter Lucin, a French guy who used to play for Marseille and PAG. They all come from the academy in Dallas. This season and last season, they used a lot of youth from the academy into the first team. And some of them you may know because they play the World Cup. Pomical, Savagna, they're great, promising players. And a lot of foreign clubs, especially in Europe, are following closely those players.
Now, it's also interesting to say about the development of the players. Last year, in the Under-20 World Cup, France lost to United States in the round of 16. It was a very open, interesting game. And US won it 3-2. And France had a lot of good players, like Diaby, who was marvelous at Bayer Leverkusen against Werder Bremen in the Bundesliga game, played for France, and there are some other good players there. But still, the French team lost to the US.
A friend of mine, Stephane, went to LA Galaxy. That was 2 years ago. Nearly signed for LA Galaxy as a coach, developed the academy. As the director of the academy, it didn't happen for various reasons. Even though he's telling me there's still a long way to go, there's a lot of potential in the States with the young players, but they need to have the right coaching structure in place. So what happened, they signed an agreement with the French Federation, and they do some exchanges between coaches and to look at what's working in France in the academies and try to transfer that in the States, but not using everything from the French academies. But this partnership has been signed with the French Federation and the MLS.
Watch this space. More leagues are coming back out of the coronavirus situation. So what have you been watching this week, Dmytro?
Yeah, Estonia returned, and if you wanted me to describe it in one word, I would go for modest. Something like that. From Costa Rica, it was Guadalupe Limon on Tuesday, and then 3 games from Estonia, and K-League game where our friend Osmar Ibanez scored a winning goal for Seoul FC.
Well done, Osmar. Yes, the winning goal in a 2-1 away win for FC Seoul at Pohang Steelers came with 15 minutes to go, scored from a corner. He's off the mark for the season, and it means that FC Seoul are now joint top of the table, along with Ulsan Hyundai, Jeonbuk and Sanju Sangmu, who all have 6 points. The Estonian Premium Ligue was suspended in early March after just 1 round of games. Every game is live on YouTube, and the Game of the Week is live in Estonia on ETV2. Hosted from the touchline this week by Aet Süvari for the comeback game. Unfortunately, it turned out to be a 0-0 draw between champions Flora Tallinn and Tammika Tartu. That happens a bit. Aet's with us now. Did it feel unusual with the extra precautions needed to broadcast?
I was thinking as I was going to the stadium that it's going to feel really unusual, that it's like we're back after 2 months and all of these new regulations and rules that we have to follow. It's going to be really different. But once I got there, it wasn't really that different once the game had actually started, or to be more accurate, once the broadcast had started and I had started my work and, sitting in the studio before the match, just getting into the match and introducing the teams and everything. And it didn't really feel that different. It felt like, football is back and yeah, we have some new things that we need to do and clean the surfaces and wear the masks before the broadcast starts. But other than that, it was, football's back.
So that didn't feel very unusual, the fact that everything has to be wiped down and everything has to be just so?
I think it's just the new reality. I think we just have to get used to that. And, it's a small price to pay for to be able to watch football again live and enjoy the excitement of it.
I mean, I know some of the stadiums in Estonia are reasonably small, but this was in the national stadium. It's the Alakok Arena. It's where the European Super Cup was on a few years ago, the Madrid derby. So you've got pretty much the biggest stadium in the country. You've got football back, but the stadium's empty. That must feel kind of unusual.
It was unusual, although, to be fair, it is a big stadium for Estonia. It's rarely full. Especially when we're talking about league games, it's not full. It's not even close to being full usually during the league games. But because it's built kind of like as a circle, it's very contained. So all the sounds and the noises really sort of reverberate back and sound really loud. So even if there's only 1,000 people watching, it feels like a proper crowd. So yes, that felt strange and a little bit sad, of course. But, once the game got going, if you didn't pay much attention to that, it wasn't really that strange. But it was interesting, though, that you could hear so clearly what the players were saying to each other, what the coaches were saying. Even as some of the substitutes were doing the warm-ups, you could hear what they were talking about. And there was even quite an interesting little storm in a teacup when one of the younger players threatened to break the opponent's knees and make sure that he never plays football again. And it got picked up here by the press and was kind of like spun into this great story. How, oh, wow, what we just heard. Well, it turned out to be nothing really very serious, but it was just so it's something we would have missed otherwise.
Well, at least they didn't threaten to cough on him. And in terms of the biggest games there, like the crowds you get would be a few thousand?
A few thousands, probably pushing it a bit too far. Maybe the biggest crowds would be about 1,500 for the derby games between Levadia and Flora, or Flora and Kalju. These are the most popular ones. But yes, the audience is growing steadily every year. So it might have been 2,000 this year. So we will never know now.
Well, that's true. Is this going to be the situation for the season now? It will be empty stadiums for the rest of the season? Is that decision been made?
No, not quite. With this, we are allowed to let in the public from the 1st of July, but only 1,000 people. That's the maximum. And maybe after that, I don't know. We'll see how things go. But for the time being, from 1st of July onwards, it's maximum 1,000 people allowed.
I mean, and I see a lot of the most recent Estonian national squad, a lot still play in Estonia, which is still quite healthy, I guess, for the domestic game.
Yes, it is. Yes. People are very happy, for the chance and opportunity to go and get to see them play week after week. But obviously, at the same time, for the competitiveness of our national team, we would prefer for some of the players to go abroad and get a chance to play there as well. So it's kind of a double-edged sword, really. So sometimes you kind of want to see them here, and sometimes you want to see them play in a higher level.
And in terms of the coronavirus epidemic in Estonia, like, your level of deaths has been quite low compared to other countries in Europe. How has this been achieved?
I'm not sure I'm the best person to give answer to that, but I do think we reacted very early on. I think it was only the numbers who had been diagnosed were still in their, I don't know, maybe about 10 people had been diagnosed when we already had the lockdown in place and quarantines and everything. And Estonians do normally even, we're not extremely social people, to be honest. So social distancing isn't that strange to us. And as opposed to Southern Europeans, we don't usually hug and kiss when we say hello. We keep a distance always. We don't gather very much. It's also the climate here. It's too cold to gather all the time and, be together. So I think it's the sort of our natural social distancing combined with the measures put in place from quite early on. And people are also quite diligent in doing what the government says. We're not very rebellious, I suppose. If the government says stay at home, then Estonians just grunt and bear it, basically.
Yeah, but wasn't one of the early cases as well on one of the remote islands because of a volleyball match?
It was, yes. There was a European Cup game. It was originally supposed to be played one leg in Italy, in Milan, and one leg in that island. It's a small island called Saaremaa. Because of the situation in northern Italy, they decided to play both of the legs in Saaremaa. Obviously, not a good decision, but back then, in very early days of March, I guess people didn't really have the scope yet, how serious this problem is, how serious is this illness. And it was allowed. So the game was played, and it did cause a very, very serious situation in the island of Saaremaa. And thankfully by now, it's over there as well. So that island has been opened up as well, and things are getting better. But yes, it would have been much better for Estonia overall had that game not happened, but it did happen.
In your league, well, from what I've seen this week, for example, there are a lot of young foreign players. Examples like players from Africa. I saw a guy who joined Paide, and he played for Mali in the Under-20 World Cup last year. So is there any sort of, let's say, network of agents bringing all those young players to Estonia? So that would be their first European experience. So they then can go on and probably make money for the clubs and, of course, for the agents.
Yes, I think so. Yes, there are a couple of agents who work with agents in Africa or agents in Europe who have contacts in Africa. And Paide has been one of the success stories. They have brought in African players before. Like last year, they brought in a very good player called Alassane Yatta, and he has now moved on. I think he only spent half a season here. He was really, really good. And then he moved on to I'm not sure. I think it was Sweden, perhaps Norway. And I think because of those success stories that we've had, a couple of really good players have come. That has encouraged the agents and the clubs to trust that network, I suppose.
Also, another thing that I've noticed where the wind in the first few games was just ferocious. So I just remembered how Marcello Lippi was visiting Scotland, I think, and he said, I just don't really understand how you can teach kids anything with this wind. So I was just wondering also, when a kid, for example, wants to play football in Estonia, how does it start for him? Do his parents pay any fees for the club, or is it just free for a kid to come in and start playing football? And what kind of coaching he could get at this early age?
It's quite often that the coaches from youth clubs go to nursery schools and kindergartens to not specifically football training, but just to kind of like once a week, they get together, the children, and they say, we'll play, and they play with a soft ball. And it's not like really a proper football training or anything, but it's more like a game. And that kind of introduces children to football and makes them like it, I suppose, and also helps parents to decide whether that's what they want their children to do once they're 6 or 7 years old and are sort of like going to school and picking their first trainings or what they want to do. And also it gives coaches a chance to maybe already start weeding out the kids who show any kind of potential or at least interest. So that's one thing that they do. But yeah, usually it's parents just bring their kids to clubs. All of the clubs here have their own youth systems, not exactly academies, but sort of youth leagues and youth clubs, and they all have youth trainers, youth coaches, and it's not free. You have to pay a monthly fee, but it's not very expensive, and usually the municipal system gives you some kind of subsidy towards it, or like if you have 3 children, you only have to pay for 1 to go, and the others can join free, or sometimes it's something like that. So it's not expensive, and you have to pay something for any kind of extracurricular activities that your kids want to do, be it sports or art or whatever. And when it comes to sports, then I think football is probably one of the cheapest ones, because you don't have to pay any kind of extra equipment. I can't imagine what it would be like for equestrian sports, for example, or rally driving, which is massively popular here.
You mentioned that the biggest crowd you might get at the league game is 1,500. I'm just wondering, former players like Mart Poom or Konstantin Vasiljev, when they just walk around Tallinn, do they recognize? Yes. People say, "Oh yeah, that's the greatest player we've ever had."
They are definitely recognized, but they can also walk around. Like I said, Estonians are sort of like not very social. Like, they stare a lot, but they don't really go and talk. Sometimes they might say, "Oh, can I take a picture with you?" But it's nothing like, you can't compare it to Britain or Ireland. It's nothing like that. I have lived in Scotland for a couple of years, so yeah, I mean, it's just so different the way superstars are seen here and they're seen, in Britain and Ireland. It's massively different, and here people are just kind of like reserved, I suppose. So they can walk around, but they are very popular and very loved here as well.
I think in Scotland, if you would meet anyone playing for the national team now, people wouldn't even bother talking to them, considering how successful the team is.
Yes.
I spoke to some of the colleagues back home, and there were some Ukrainian players and managers also worked in Estonia. Do you know if there is any influence from the so-called black markets on betting patterns and all that in the local league games? Because they had some rumors, let's say, in some of the games.
Yes, we've definitely had it in the past. Maybe 5 years ago, maybe even a bit less. There was talks about so-called Lithuanian mafia. Kind of like, there are guys in Lithuania who phone their counterparts, like the peers here, and they talk to them and they want to get them involved in stuff like that. And of course, there have been games over the past 10 years, let's say, I think about 5 or 6 games where the manipulation has been caught. But our FA has worked very hard on getting the illegal betting and all that kind of thing under control. And obviously there are the UEFA systems, the radars that keep an eye on the whole betting system. And I think they work very closely with that. So in the last couple of years, the problem, at least to my knowledge, has been much, much smaller. Maybe I don't even think that there has been any kind of rumors about specific games being manipulated within the past 2 or 3 years. But before that, there were problems. And I know sometime in the recent past, maybe in the past 5 years, when 8 guys were even prosecuted, taken to court. Some of them were exonerated and some of them were, I don't know, maybe they had some kind of a deal. They made a deal. I can't remember the specifics, but yes, they are working to eradicate it, but it's obviously kind of like a disease. It's hard to root out.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that this is just like, Lithuanians, evil Lithuanians who come here. I'm sure there are Estonians doing it too. It's just a matter of getting caught.
By virtue of the fact that I think there's only about 4 or 5 leagues currently operating in Europe, have you noticed that there's a greater popularity overseas in the Estonian Premier League?
Yes, as I'm interviewed by an Irish podcast at the moment, and definitely yes. But also there has been interest in, I don't know specifically what countries, but some countries have been interested in buying the rights to show our league. And also I've noticed that the journalists have reported on what's happening and probably were watching the broadcast on Wednesday and the other ones on Tuesday as well. Although I don't know specific numbers yet, how high the numbers went up. But I think there has been interest, which is good for us. But I'm just hoping that we can offer all these football-hungry Europeans at least some kind of a respite while this is going on.
Yeah, Poland's back next week as well, so maybe a little bit of extra competition. And all the games are on YouTube as well, not just the games that your channel covers, but all the matches are available internationally now as well.
Yes, they are. Yes, and all of them can be watched, and even Women's Premier League games from June onwards. 1 game per round.
Because obviously the popularity of women's football has risen. You showed the Women's World Cup as well last summer. What was the reaction like to that?
Very positive, overwhelmingly positive. I was quite surprised, and the viewing numbers were very good. And we didn't show the whole thing on TV, but we did have all the games on online. Yeah, I think people are getting more and more into the idea that women can play in a high level as well, and the competitiveness, the strength behind it. It's all good. So there's hope.
And I have to ask you about the men's national team as well, because there was only 1 point gained from the qualifying campaign for Euro 2020. And I mean, you look at some of the players you've got right now: Klavan at Cagliari, who had a bit of time in England, Henrik Oyama, Widzu Łódź, Henry Anier, who's in the Netherlands, Eric Sorg, who's in the United States. So what was it that sort of went wrong over the past couple of years?
We've had some changes, like some of the older players have sort of retired now. Some of the younger players have come up. It doesn't all gel that well. I'm not entirely sure what the reason is, but after our success with in 2011, when we famously played Ireland and lost, I think things started to go a bit downhill, because maybe in the beginning we were sort of laying on the laurels a bit and thinking like, oh, we can do this now, but it actually requires work and development all the time. Like I said, some of the players retired. Some of our best players had problems, like Ragnar Klavan was injured quite often. He had the club commitments, which took quite a toll on him, and he wasn't always available to play. Konstantin Vasiljev had problems in Poland, so he didn't get like a regular playing time there. And then I think just like tiny things, it was kind of like a butterfly effect. One thing happened, then another thing, things kind of unraveled. Then we had a new coach, a completely new coach from Sweden, who perhaps didn't know all the players and the local, because our players had gotten so used to playing under this Estonian coach, Tarmo Rüütli, and then this new coach came and just things didn't work out. And one thing started unraveling and then another thing, and it was kind of like, before we knew it, it had all deteriorated to a point where it was kind of like hard to get back up again. And then obviously had quite a hard group as well with Netherlands and Germany, and yeah, Estonians were bitterly disappointed in that group and in the results, but hopefully things will go back up again, because that's what happens in football. It's like you have these ups and downs, and once you're down, the only way back is up, I suppose.
And I mean, as you say, even though the league gets maybe 1,500, 2,000 at the games, I mean, I've been at a couple of Estonia home games, and like your stadium is full, so it has a really good following. It
has, yes, yeah. The national team is popular and loved, and people are behind it, even when we're not doing that well, which is a good sign. We had quite high hopes about this year now, hoping with the Nations League. And because there you get to play like teams that are on your level, and you get to win, which is a big boost for your, the whole mental side. Because I can imagine it can be so disheartening to lose 0-8. It's just one of these things that can just sort of like draw the joy out of it. But yeah, before the coronavirus hit, we had such high hopes for this year, for the Baltic tournament and for the Nations League. But now, I don't know what's going to happen, if we even get to play this year.
Aet Süvari of ETV in Estonia, thank you. And no football in France at the moment, of course, as the season has been brought to an early halt. We're going to do a special edition on French football next time around with Ligue 1 World Feed commentator Matt Spiro. He does the official Ligue 1 podcast Le Beau Jeu, and there's a book coming out soon in the renaissance of French football. Sacre Bleu, from Zidane to Mbappe, a football journey. The shutdown in France, Matt, how's that being viewed overall?
Hi, Will. It's been viewed sort of, a little bit like in other countries, I think, insofar as people don't think the instructions have been that clear. The government's come in for a lot of criticism. There have been lies about the fact that nobody needed to wear masks, and actually they didn't have masks in France initially, and that was why they were saying that. So yeah, there's been the usual sort of discussion and controversy. It's been stricter actually here, certainly, than in the UK, where my family are, where you can basically go out without being checked all the time. Because here in France, we've had to fill out an authorization form every time we want to go out, even to walk the dog or to go and buy some bread or something. But look, we've got through it in some respects because the lockdown's been eased 10 days ago, and my kids have sort of started going back to school, only sort of 1 or 2 days a week. But it's been a very strange period, and we also know that the football was stopped very quickly. So we haven't had so much the debate, when is the league going to start again? Because as soon as the Prime Minister said there's going to be no sport until September, the French League had an emergency meeting and they said, well, listen, we're stopping the season now. We're going to give the title to PSG. We're going to work everything out on a points per game basis. And 2 teams have been relegated. There's been a lot of arguing, but there's been no debate about when the league is going to start, because it is not going to restart.
And was there general unhappiness or acceptance that was it? The league's called, we're done.
I think initially, of course, there was anger, particularly from the 2 teams that were relegated. But I think initially, generally, people accepted it. And then the longer we've gone on and the more people have been hearing about other leagues, and obviously the Bundesliga starting, and we've had different clubs taking legal action against the league, and we've had Lyon and their president, Jean-Michel Aulas, who is very outspoken and also very powerful in the French game, taking legal action and still sort of campaigning for the league to restart, saying it's not too late. We can, change our mind. So I think in more recent days, people have thought, well, hang on, maybe it was a bit hasty. Maybe we should have waited a couple of weeks, looked into all the different possibilities. But yeah, the main thing, to be honest, Will, in France, I think it's similar in a lot of countries, the finances are driving these decisions. Then in France, have got a new TV deal starting in August with Mediapro, who've come in, and the new French domestic deal is going to be absolutely huge. It's more than €1 billion, first time it's gone that high. And I think the French League decided they needed just to make sure there was no way Mediapro could back out of this deal. If, for example, they said, we're going to try and finish this season and we might have to push next season back to January, that might be giving them a chance to say, well, hang on, we're not going to give you this money. And then French football would have been, in enormous trouble. It's already in big trouble. But yeah, if that TV deal fell through, it would be the end for a lot of clubs, I think. By
the way, how much of a surprise was it that Mediapro came in to launch a new channel, because they are known as a global distributor and not, an outlet to watch?
Very surprising. It was surprising that the deal was that lucrative. Like I said, over $1 billion. I think the last deal was just under 700 million. So it's a massive increase at a time when Ligue 1, I wouldn't say it wouldn't warrant a massive increase, but there's not been a lot of suspense, in terms of PSG just walking the league title over the last couple of years. So it was a big surprise. And the fact that Mediapro, came in, not even a French company, and have put this money in. There was surprise. There were also reports about how Mediapro had been talking to Serie A, and that Serie A had done their due diligence and decided that they didn't want to go with Mediapro because they weren't convinced about the financial guarantee. So there was concern in France, particularly because Mediapro have taken quite a lot of time. They've been leaving it quite late to sort of set up their channel. So people have still been thinking, well, hang on, are they, they're not going to sort of walk out on us at the last minute, are they? But they are finally sort of getting things set up now.
Sort of the timing is quite bad for a number of elements. Is it a good time to bring a book out? Obviously, it was taking a long time to write and to go through the various drafts and so on, and then this happens.
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know is the answer. I would, the fact that bookstores are closed at the moment, as far as I'm aware, in the UK, I don't know if that's the case in Ireland, would suggest it's not a great time to bring a book out. The book industry has obviously taken a big hit. I think it is slowly starting to sort of to wake up a bit again. The flip side is that people certainly during the lockdown, have a lot of time on their hands and probably are keen to read about things other than COVID. And also newspapers, podcasts and radio stations are keen for other things to talk about. So, I'm hopefully getting a bit of publicity for it. The reason that we brought it out and that I sort of busted a gut over Christmas to try and finish this book was to try and bring it out before the Euros. So when the Euros were postponed, I was certainly thinking, do we put this back? There may be an updated version to come out before the Euros actually do take place, if they take place next year. But look, I don't know. Yeah, ask me that question again in a few months.
And we'll have an hour-long French football special coming up in our next edition with Matt Spiro. Sacre Bleu, from Zidane to Mbappe, a football journey. That's his new book. It's coming out at the end of the month. We now try to have a commentator on every week to talk about their commentary heroes. And this week, a man synonymous with Spanish football coverage. Here are the commentary heroes of Rob Palmer of Sky Sports.
It's an interesting one. I was given my break by John Motson in 1988 Seoul Olympics when I was playing for a team called Bridlington Town. John Motson came as the reporter to cover the game in the FA Cup when they covered the team for the very first round of the FA Cup all the way to the final. I was in goal for Brid. I'd been a media student. I was looking to get into the media. I caught him at the bar. He remembered that. And then come the Seoul Olympics, John Motson couldn't do the interview. Brian Barwick rang up and said, who are the interesting players in your team for a feature? Motty said, why don't I do it? And that gave him my TV break. So I owe my kind of career, if you like, to John Motson. So Motty would be one. Whether I would actually base my style on John Motson is arguable. When I hear Alan Parry, occasionally he's on the TV, and I wonder whether that was my game. So maybe someone delivery, and the fact that I moved to Merseyside 30 years ago, maybe the delivery and the chirpiness of Alan Parry. And I also followed Clive Tilsley into Granada Television, and Clive gave me some great tips when I succeeded him at Granada TV. And I think he's a fantastic wordsmith as well. And I've got to mention Rob Hawthorne, who's my best pal. We go back to when we were interviewed on each other's CVs back in 1986, and he is my best pal in the world. So an amalgamation of all of those.
Yeah, I remember you in Granada. I mean, it was a good period. Manchester United were on the way up. Liverpool had a couple of seasons and then were on the way down by that stage, I guess.
Yeah, we were. I was at Granada TV in the early 90s. My boss, a guy called Paul Doherty, his dad was the great Peter Doherty, the Island International. He was my mentor and Clive Tilsley's mentor before that. And we had a wonderful in at Manchester United. We were doing all kinds of behind-the-scenes documentaries, waiting for them to win the Premier League title. I think we finally got it at the third attempt of filming for a whole season. So we used to go in there and do all the Manchester United in-house videos before Man U TV as well. They had an association with Granada TV, and I think it was a monthly video. So you go interview Sir Alex Ferguson at 7:30 in the morning over a cup of tea and breakfast as well. So it was a wonderful apprenticeship. And we also did the same for Liverpool Football Club. So I was there as well as part of the kind of the Spice Boys generation with Fowler and McManaman and those people as well. So those were great times, different times to these days where you've got to go through agents, solicitors, lawyers, press people and media mentors or whatever just to say hello to a footballer.
What was Fergie like over breakfast? I have to ask.
I'd like to say frightening, but because you were kind of there in an official capacity and you had been briefed on maybe what you wanted to talk about, it wasn't as fearsome as meeting him after they'd... do you know, it wasn't too bad when they'd drawn a game. When they'd lost the game. When they won a game, obviously, he was okay. When they lost the game, he was pretty magnanimous, but when he drew a game, he was horrible. But generally, if we did those interviews there, he'd be sitting there. Sometimes you'd have to go tell him he's got a bit of egg dripping off his chin, or he was slurping his tea into the microphone and things like that. And that was the most difficult bit, really. But he had great body language as well. You could tell if he didn't like you asking the question that he would cough, and if you liked the question, you can see me now. He'd sit back, put his hands behind his head, roll back in the chair, look up to the skies and regale you with a great story as well. So it was a good education. He treated the reporters like he treated the players. You never quite knew where you were with him.
Yeah, and the thing with Granada is that there was a long line of different commentators as well. Like there was yourself, Clive, Martin Tyler, Gerald Sinstadt. It seemed to have been a great place. Nelton Wellesby was presenting and he became ITV's network presenter. It just seemed to be a great academy of broadcasting talent, if you like.
Yeah, Paul Doherty was the great man there. He's the only man I think I've ever seen Sir Alex Ferguson genuinely scared of. There are stories that I can't tell you them here, but Paul kept Sir Alex in a job. He persuaded the Edwards family to keep Fergie in a job back in the Mark Robbins year. It was that 1990 when they onto the FA Cup. So again, Paul was. Malcolm Allison would just pop in for a drink occasionally. John Bond would pop in for a drink. Fergie, if he was in town, would come in and have a cup of coffee with him as well. So the people that were in there broadcasting wise at my time were me. I was the commentator. Rob McCaffrey, who went to Sky Television, he was the reporter. Elton was the presenter, who was an ITV's network presenter. Ali Mann was a reporter and also a commentator as well. And before that, when we were researching games, you would have Martin Tyler, who started off as a researcher and became a commentator. Gerald Sinstadt. I got a feeling as well, Barry Davis had a very short spell there as well. I might be wrong, but I think back in the very early days as well. And then there were odd people as well, like Paul Greengrass, who was the great kind of film producer, who was also a researcher and I think worked on World in Action at Granada Television. So it was an eclectic mix of people that you were following through those doors.
No, you know what? You're right. Barry Davis was at Granada, I think, in the 60s before he joined BBC, and he did a World Cup for ITV. And didn't you as well? Did you do an early 90s World Cup?
Oh God, you have got very good knowledge, haven't you? Scary that, yeah.
No, it's not. Because didn't you do one of the goals of the tournament? It was your commentary, wasn't it?
Oh, I ran, I think his name.
Saudi Arabia. Yeah. That's how I remember.
Oh, I ran and how he ran. Yeah, that was. I was I went over to. I played football and I went to America to university on a scholarship over there. So I had this big thing about wanting to go back and kind of complete the circle as well. So I was coaching in Minnesota in the summer of '94. And I wrote to Trevor East, who was head of ITV, I think then, saying, look, if you're short of anybody to make the tea, make the coffee, do the airport runs, whatever, I'd just like to be involved in the World Cup. And I got a call out the blue one day from Trevor. I was in the field, I think in Wisconsin, coaching football close to Minnesota. And he said, would you like to come? He said, Peter Brackley's doing all the non-ITV games. There are too many for him to do. Would you come and take a couple off Peter to take the weight off his shoulders? And I said, yeah. And he said, fine, right. We booked you a flight tomorrow morning. We knew you say yes. And you're flying into Dallas and you've got a game at, I think, 6 o'clock the next night. I'm not as exacting, but I think it was a Nigeria game. And he said, you're doing that. It went well for me. So whichever game was being shown on the BBC, I would commentate on ITV. And obviously they would use the highlights and then they would use it in the packages. So I worked all the way up to the semi-finals when unexpectedly my son was born 3 weeks early and I had to come back. July the 10th, he's telling me. I know your birthday.
15 weeks early.
15 weeks early. He was born 15 weeks early and it was July the 10th that I had to come back. So, yeah, ITV were great to me. So I did one championship for them.
And then obviously Sky came along and that's it. That's been the story of your life, successfully.
Yes, as you quite rightly said in the build, I've been a servant to Sky and to the broadcasters since I was in 95, 96, I think I went there, but I worked on Euro 96 for the world broadcasters as well. And that was like kind of the first year that I joined Sky. So I've been there ever since.
Well, that's it for this week. Back early next week with more. Please remember to rate and subscribe no matter what your service is. You can leave comments on our Twitter page, Lockdown Football, and shows are now going up on YouTube also. So until next time, from Mark Rodden, Stephane, Jauny, Dmytro, Dzhulai, and me, Will Downing, it's goodbye.